What I want to do this morning, this is Shabbat Teshuvah. I want to point out just a couple of the themes of Teshuvah, the way in which Teshuvah appears within the Torah reading and in the Haftarah, and that'll be my way of reminding you all that this is Shabbat Teshuvah, and this is the time in which we turn our hearts, our minds, our attention, our actions to repair. And the tradition that we have of the Machzor is that you can't come to God asking God for teshuvah for the errors of our ways that have to do with our relationship with God until you've turned to the people in your life that you may have wronged and gone to them and asked for teshuvah as well. That's the whole message of this. How does it play out within the Torah reading? Well, one way in which it plays out in Parshat Ha'azinu is in Deuteronomy 32, verse 7. Towards the beginning of the Parsha, the beginning of the second Aliyah, we read, Zachor Yamot Olam, remember the days of old, Binu Shnot Dor Vador, consider the years of ages past, Skenecha Vayomru Lach, ask your father, ask your parent, and he or she, they will inform you. So the first element of teshuvah that we encounter within the Torah reading has to do with memory, with remembrance. Zachor Yamot Olam, remember the days of old. Remember your past. Good messages for bar mitzvah boys too. Remember the days of past. In many of the stanzas of Moses' pre-death message, he asked for more than anything else that Israel remember. Remember what he taught them. Remember God's covenant. Remember your history. Remember how God freed you, how God nourished you in the wilderness, how God constantly protects you and saves us from our enemies, even when we go astray. The Torah reading clearly predicts that Israel will go astray. Now that's either because it's reading backwards already into history that had occurred, or it just understands the nature of human beings, that we're going to make mistakes, that we're going to move away from the covenant. And yet, even when we go astray, we remember that God accepts us as long as we return to God, as long as there's teshuvah, repentance and return. So what Moses asked for in his pre-death song to the people is that they remember God and the purpose of Torah. Moshe's final words are not about himself, but they're about memory. Zachor Yamot Olam, remember the days of old. What's also fascinating about this is that the memory starts at a very high level, Moshe, Israel, and God, but it moves very quickly to Sha'al Avicha Vayagetcha. Ask your father, and he will tell you. Skenecha, the elders, ask them, and they will tell you. We move from the abstract to the personal. Parents have an obligation to not only tell their children about the covenant and the relationship and the obligations and responsibilities that come with it, but must also live and breathe Judaism so that our children will learn to live and breathe it too. Rashi on this verse points out that the failure of teshuvah is related to people who have not directed their hearts to the past such that they can learn how to live in the present and the future. Zachor. We begin with memory. From there, we turn to Deuteronomy 32, verse 12. Adonai badad yanchenu. God alone did guide him, did guide Moses and the people. Ve'ein imo el nechar. And there was no alien or other God that was at his side. Right? God alone. When I read this, it's a reminder that we're not alone. We're never alone. I hear the remez, the hint in my head always of Psalm 23, where we all must walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Right? We all, eventually in our lives, we're going to experience death and mourning. And we're going to walk through that valley. But the psalmist says in the psalm, King David reminds us that we don't take that journey alone. Our tradition establishes the whole notion of Shiva and comforting the mourners in response to that idea that there are moments in our lives when we're not alone. We're accompanied by the people closest to us, our families, our friends, our community, and God. God goes on this journey with us. God comforts us. We're never alone. And so in this case, Adonai Badad Yanchenu is a reminder that even when we go astray, we don't go off the derech, so to speak, alone either. We might move away from God, but God doesn't move away from us. And if God doesn't move away from us, if God is with us, even at those moments when we might feel alone, or we might feel that God is distant, with God still being with us, it always presents the opportunity for teshuvah. It's as easy as just turning around because God is there. You remember that old poem that people used to buy on all sorts of different things and hang about the person who was walking through the sand and noticing the footprints? Right? That poem represents this for me. Right? The person's walking through the sand and sees most of their life there's two sets of footprints and turns to God and says, how come at the most difficult times in my life I look in the sand, there's only one set of footprints? And God answers the person in this poem, my child, it's at those moments that I carried you. At those moments I carried you. Adonai Badad Yanchenu. God goes with us. Another example of teshuvah can be found chapter 32, verse 18. Tzur yidladcha teshi v'tishkach el mecholalecha. You neglected the rock, the tzur, meaning God, that begot you, that brought you into being. You forgot the God who brought you forth. Here is a reminder that we've neglected God, and that part and parcel of the human experience is going to be that that's going to happen. We're going to move away. We're going to get busy. We're going to grow. We're going to doubt. We're going to have moments of despair and anger, and we're going to turn and we're going to say, God, why me? We know, however, that there's no answer to the why me. That was Rosh Hashanah's first day sermon. But we're going to stray. And if we're going to stray, there's also always the possibility of return. And where does that return happen? It happens chapter 32, verse 46. Vayomer Alehem, and Moses finished reciting all these words to Israel, and then he said to them, Simu levavchem l'chol advarim asher nochi me'id bachem hayom. Take to heart all the words which I have warned you this day. Asher titzavun et b'nechem, and enjoin them upon your children. Another reminder that you have to teach it to your children. Lishmor la'asot ekol divrei haTorah hazot, that you shall observe and do all of the teachings of this Torah. Lishmor v'la'asot. It's a remez of when Bnei Yisrael receives the Torah on Sinai in Shmot, in Exodus. What is it that Israel says when they're told to accept this commandment? Na'aseh v'nishma. We will do and we will observe. How do we return to God? Ultimately, we turn our attentions back to the mitzvot. We turn back to Torah. We turn back to the commandments. We turn back to halakha, to that system that our ancestors have given to us through the centuries that helps us learn to create habits of holiness, to live a life of meaning and purpose. We return through lishmor la'asot, through observance and practice. And then we have the Haftarah, Shabbat Shuvah, in which the word shuv, or some conjugation of shuv, repeats over and over and over and over and over again. The Haftarah is about the process of tshuva that begins first and foremost with the recognition of guilt, and then repentance, the journey back towards God, who is always there, just waiting for us to come. And so that's the reminder on this Shabbat Shuvah, that now is the time, really, now is the time, once a year we come together as a community to remind ourselves communally of the importance of tshuva, of repentance, both in terms of repairing our relationship with God, but even more importantly, repairing our relationship with each other. As I talked about on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, and Rabbi Friar Batson is going to talk about on Yom Kippur, this is the 100th anniversary of Buber, of I and Thou. Right? And what he meant by that is it's through the intimate relationships that we have with each other, where we really learn to be present and value the other, that God, transcendence, is found in that space between us. And so today, before Yom Kippur, really every day, if there are people in your lives who have hurt you, or people in your lives that you know that you need to repair relationships with, don't wait for tomorrow. Be the Nachshon ben Aminadav, the brave one who ventures out into the water and begins the process of repentance, of tshuva. And if there's people that come to you and ask for forgiveness, forgive them. And I would even go so far as to say, even forgive those that you feel may have wronged you, but aren't asking for forgiveness. Forgiveness doesn't necessarily let them off the hook. What it does, though, is it frees you of the angst and the knots that we carry around in ourselves. And I also want to note, I'm not a big believer in forgive and forget. That's why I didn't say the word forget. I don't think that's real life. But forgiveness is hard work. It's where you can put the memory in the backseat and continue driving and looking to the future. Shabbat Shalom, Gemar Chatima Tova.